It's playoff hockey here on the Cross Ice feed. I'm David Stearns, joined with Brian Schrems, here to talk about the 2012-2013 NHL playoffs. But real briefly, we're going to touch up on the draft order that was, well, pretty much handed out tonight. And the winners this year are Schrems.
Colorado Avalanche. Well, they didn't win too much this year. That's why they're in this position. And the Florida Panthers, Tampa Bay going 1, 2, 3. Nashville at 4. Carolina 5. Calgary at 6. Edmonton 7. Buffalo 8. New Jersey 9. Dallas 10. Philly 11. Phoenix 12. Winnipeg 13. And the Columbus Blue Jackets at 14.
Not too shabby. Now, there's a lot of good depth in this year's draft, as we've been talking about the last couple of episodes here. It's just I'm excited to see what Colorado does, whether or not they pick up McKinnon or Jones. But we're going to save that for a later show. We're going to talk more in depth about the draft. But Shrems, are you surprised that Colorado gets number one and then Edmonton down at number 7? I mean, that's getting better for them, but probably not so much in the draft. But Colorado, Florida, and Tampa up at the top 3, followed by Nashville. I like those top 4, and they could really do some damage in this year's draft.
Nashville lucked out. I'm surprised to see a couple of teams in there, to be honest with you. Nashville got a nice bid at 4 there. We talked about a couple weeks ago, not too much going on after those top 3. However, if they wanted to trade up to get into that position, to get some scoring, they certainly could do so. The 4th spot isn't too terrible, but they're going to need to address scoring. Surprised to see Calgary as high as they are, to be honest with you. And Columbus, probably. Columbus was a team that was on the verge of making the playoffs last week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And here they are picking in the top 14.
Well, not too bad. And, of course, as we talked about last week, Detroit was in trouble, but they found a way to make it happen, and they are in the playoffs for the 22nd consecutive year. So we will talk more now about the playoffs. So, of course, stay tuned for a later episode on this year's 51st NHL entry draft in Newark, New Jersey. So stay tuned for that. Now let's talk some playoff hockey. 48 games came and went, a little over 3 months of a season, and here we are. We have our 16 teams ready to do battle. Let's start in the West. Now, we thought that 8th seed was going to be the Columbus Blue Jackets, but in fact, it turned out to be the faltering Minnesota Wild up against the President's Trophy winning Chicago Blackhawks. Ray Emery is currently out, and so is David Bolland. Schrems, does that have an impact on Chicago going in against Minnesota, who Chicago has taken a 2-0-1 record against?
I don't think Chicago has anything to be worried about. They've proven this year that despite having pretty much a tandem system that they're running in goal, it hasn't seemed to cause any controversy. Emery was probably one of the best goalies in the league, statistics-wise. Minnesota, I don't think the offense is there. They put on a nice little run at the end of the season, but I think this one is pretty much set in stone. If Minnesota wins this series, it's going to be in 7 games, and it's probably going to be one of the biggest upsets that we'll see, or that we've seen probably in the past 5 or 10 years.
Well, we saw Chicago with that really hot start, trying to reach a record in wins, but kind of fell short there. But thanks to the Colorado Avalanche, I am seeing a different team nowadays. Granted, yes, they've only lost 7 in regulation, 5 in overtime, but you take a look at who they've lost to in a shootout like that of the first matchup between Minnesota and Chicago. It was Minnesota that took that game in the shootout 3-2, and then later on it was a 2-goal game midway through in about March 5th to be exact, and then a 1-0 win by Chicago on April 9th, not too long ago. I'm starting to see things turn in a different direction, that Minnesota may have Chicago's number. And you're right, this series will go to 7 games. I'm going to pick this one as the biggest upset in the playoffs right off the bat.
Wow.
I'm going to say Minnesota takes it in 7 games. I think that they're starting to figure out how to click on all cylinders. I want to say that their goaltending it's going to tighten up here. I mean, it was proof enough when they only lost 1-0 the last time against Chicago. I think they're pretty well attuned to what the Chicago offense can bring at them. I mean, with Patty Kane, Pat Sharp, and Jonathan Taves, and Marian Hossa, hit and miss he is, but when he hits it well on the
Yes.
scoreboard. But I'm going to actually side with Minnesota on this one in 7 games, but I don't think they're going to go much further than the first round. I want to call this one the big upset.
I'm 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 glad to see that Minnesota finally lived up to their expectation this season. We talked before the season, you and I, trying to figure out who's going to win the Stanley Cup, and Minnesota, they never crossed our minds, just given shortened season, trying to come across a lot of chemistry in that short of time is not the easiest thing to do in the world, especially when you're coming in with a completely different roster and some egos, I guess. But Danny Heatley never got going this season like he should have. There's a lot of chatter about a possible buyout there. He certainly hasn't lived up to expectations. But some of the most underrated players in the league play on Minnesota.
Yeah.
Their goaltender, Nicholas Backstrom, if he can stay healthy, is probably one of the most underrated goaltenders in the league. Mikko Koivu is probably one of the most underrated centers in the league. The guy is, if he can stay healthy again, a point per game. It's a tough call. I mean, they really have to pull it all together. Palmanville, I heard, is coming back. He's going to be suiting up for game one. He should be okay. Chicago's still missing Patrick Sharp, unless he entered the game last time. I didn't see the last Chicago game, but I know he was on the mend, has been on the mend for the past several months. So there's a lot of things that might play into this. I don't know. That's a bold prediction.
Well, when you take a look at the stat categories, Zach Parise and Ryan Sutter, their recent acquisitions last offseason have really turned it on for these guys. I mean, in their own right, because, I mean, Parise leading the team in goals and Sutter leading the team in assists. I mean, they're on both sides of the ice here. They're offense, defense. They're contributing. Mikko Koivu played every game this season, and he's played it well. He's just 1 point behind Parise, so you got your top two up there. And then Devin Setaguchi, oh man, he's been back and forth, over the past few years. I think this is his time to shine, if there ever was a time for Devin Setaguchi to shine. And then, of course, as you indicated, Danny Heatley too. An abysmal -12. So I guess when he's out on the ice with Kyler Brodziak, I mean, you know what to expect. So I think that this would be a great turnaround point for this team. They've been really kind of on the cooling down side lately, so it was enough to hold on to stay in the playoff spotlight here to get that 8th seed. So, they talk about teams getting hot at the right time. There is a right time to get cold too, and hopefully it's not too late to get warm and then hit the spark. That's why I'm thinking this one will take 7 games, and I think that the Minnesota Wild will give us our big upset of this year's playoffs.
I'm gonna hold you to that one. I'm gonna stick with Chicago on this one, not because they've been winning all season, but because I still think there's something missing there in Minnesota. The key offensive piece, I guess. And certainly Heatley has been a disappointment. Setaguchi has been too hot and cold for my liking.
Okay.
So I say they anticipated exits, and then the off season they go out and acquire the offense that they need to.
Okay. How many games?
I say 6 or 7.
6 or 7. Okay. All right, we'll chalk it down. All right, moving on to our next matchup here. In the West, it's the Anaheim Ducks and the Detroit Red Wings. Detroit looking like they were going to miss the postseason for the first time in almost two decades, really. So now we got the the ever so hot and surprising Anaheim Ducks with Bruce Boudreau at the helm, and then Detroit, the ever so enigmatic Detroit. I'll give them credit for being 2-1-0 against the Ducks this year, but aside from one blowout and then followed by a tighter game after that, they haven't seen each other in quite some time now. We're at the end of April, and they're going to be starting things up here with May going into the first round. They haven't seen each other in a while, and Detroit has kind of found a little bit of life inside of that aging yet retiring Uh, lineup. I don't know how to phrase it. I mean, without Holmstrom and without Lidstrom, it's a bit of a different team. But do they have it to move on?
I don't think you're going to see Detroit move on, which is a good wake-up call for them. Coming into this season, they knew they were going to be without Lidstrom, and I don't think anybody could have predicted it was going to be this much of a swing in terms of production. Their defense is a serious place for improvement. You lose Rafalski over the past couple of years. You lose Lidstrom this year. The replacements that they brought in to try and fill that void. Brendan Smith was supposed to be a young gun who was supposed to step up. He certainly hasn't done so. Ian White hasn't shown that he's capable of handling that role. Nicholas Cronwall, yeah, he's good on the back end for offense, but they're going to need somebody a little bit more offensive minded. So we know the top line up front, Datsuk, Zetterberg, and maybe Mule. Other than that, though, it's kind of hit and miss. They don't have that depth scoring like they used to. But on the opposite side of things, I didn't have Anaheim even making the playoffs this year, and they've been a nice surprise. I'm glad to see Jonas Hiller back to where he was a couple years ago. He dealt with that whole vertigo issue, and he's got a little bit of competition on his backside now with Mr. Fast
Yeah.
emerging as a pretty good goaltender. So I don't know. Their age, I guess, kind of bothered me a little bit coming into this season. They got Koivu. They have Solani still in probably his last season. I don't think you'll see him make another full season run at it, but I don't know. Detroit's going to have a pretty tough hill to climb. Howard hasn't been his best this year, and I think that's where they're going to come down to, where this matchup will come down to a win or a loss, and I think Anaheim takes him out 4-2.
How much more can Howard do for this team? They're fifth in the league in goals against average. I do say that the defense needs to step it up a bit because they're allowing more shots than they are used to. But I honestly think that Howard obviously got that big signing for 6 years for a reason. But sharing the net with two other keepers. I mean, Mrazek only saw 2 games and split 1-1 with the 2 goals against average. But Jonas Gustafsson, the monster sitting right behind Howard is, I guess he can be dependable at times, but the goals against average, thankfully, are below 3, so that's good for all 3 goaltenders. I think Howard's going to be fine, and I think Howard is as good as he possibly can be. 5 shutouts this season, tied with Pekka Rinne from Nashville for number 1 in the league. I'm going to give him a little bit more credit than you did, my friend. It's just that when it comes down to overtime games, he's not the best. We had 7 overtime losses at his hands, and then 13 losses underneath his belt. I mean, if you put the loss and the overtime losses together, he's a 500 goaltender because he's got 21 wins underneath his belt. And I'm a numbers guy, and just looking at the numbers, if you took away the goals against average and the save percentage, he looks like a mediocre goaltender. But that save percentage and the goals against average really stand out to me, and I actually think that the Detroit Red Wings can take this series away from Anaheim, but I don't think they'll have it. I think that it will be the Anaheim Ducks that will shore it up. I mean, you've got better depth on Anaheim. Yes, they're a little bit aged, but you do have production out of Teemu Solani and Saku Koivu. I'm actually gonna say that that Anaheim takes this one in 5 games, and they're going to be very low-scoring games. And I think that you're going to see Getzlaf and Perry and Ryan just tear it up out there, and some lovely help on the back end on your secondary scoring from your I don't know what to call them, the seasoned crew. The old webbed feet of Solani and Koivu will do their magic and ensure that these guys move on to the next round.
It's good to have those guys in the locker room, someone who's been there and done what they've done. And Anaheim, they do have some young budding talent on their team right now. Obviously, Corey Perry and Ryan Getzlaf are
Bobby Ryan, yeah.
Good players. There's Bobby Ryan as well. But, you have somebody like Cogliano. You have someone like, I don't know, Palmieri. Palmieri's a name that we've thrown around quite a bit as of late. I mean, you have the grinders on the team.
Mm-hmm.
You have Sheldon Souray on the back end, who's going to make a good chunk of money over the next couple of years at 35 plus years of age. Francois Beauchemin came out this year and put up some impressive numbers for Francois Beauchemin.
Yeah, there's still some
And
names on this team that date back to the last time these guys won the cup back in '07. So, especially like Boschman, he's becoming a veteran leader himself.
it's hard to say. I mean, on paper, I'd say these teams are evenly matched,
Mm-hmm.
but Anaheim has shown us a lot more this season, and I think that the edge is going to go to them. Maybe Howard's numbers are a little deceiving. Perhaps it was his lack of defense this year that put him in that spot. So maybe I'll retract that statement and say, Howard maybe did have a good season and a deceiving season, to say the least.
Well, where do you want to go in number of games on this one?
I'm going to stick with 6.
You're going to stick with 6. Okay. All right. And to give justice over to Faths and Hiller that have split the season, a lot better numbers than Howard when you look at the win-loss and overtime loss columns. So, moving on to our next matchup. And this one is, it looks convincing on paper, but Vancouver and San Jose, the Sharks have had the Vancouver Canucks number this year, and 59 points to finish the season up at the top there, Vancouver. San Jose at 57 points. This one might be too close to call. I mean, Vancouver is starving for a cup.
Yeah, I like the goaltending competitiveness of these two teams. Niemi has set himself a really, really good season. They kind of got flat there after their torrid start. And I was watching a piece on TSN the other day, and Luongo and Schneider, they seem to understand what needs to be done. I don't think there's a controversy there. Whoever is playing well is going to play. And the thing is, whoever you put in net is going to get the job done. They're both good goaltenders. I haven't seen the scoring depth from the Canucks like I have seen in the past. And similar to the Canucks are the Sharks. 2 years ago, you had an abundance of scoring to make you think that, this is the Sharks' year. And I think that at least one or two analysts from every network does this every year, saying this is the year for the Sharks. This has to be it. They have the goaltending, they have the depth in scoring, and then something just falters.
Yeah.
And this year, the depth that should have been there scoring-wise isn't necessarily there.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, to consider here, as far as the numbers speak to me in a lot of ways. I'll tell you that right now. San Jose looks like they have a solid edge against the Vancouver Canucks in a few categories, except for the fact that Vancouver is 19th in the league in goals per game. San Jose is 24th in the league in goals per game. But the other categories really stand out to me. 6th in goals against average, or goals against, and then power play, they are 7th. Penalty kill, they are 6th. Vancouver, it's a different story. Their power play is 22nd, and their penalty kill is 8th. We'll give them credit for that, but their goals against is about 9th. So, I mean, you've got some mix and matching going on here with these categories, and I'm actually thinking that San Jose will definitely advance on here. I'm sorry, Vancouver. In a couple of brackets I have set up right now, yes, I do brackets not only for March Madness but for the NHL playoffs. I do have Vancouver going pretty far. As a matter of fact, I have one of the brackets with them winning. But in reality, I don't think they can do it. I really don't. I have no faith in this team. The Corey Schneider and Roberto Luongo controversy, I think you were talking about the piece that was a satire on who was number one and thing 1, thing 2. They were wearing the shirts. I don't know if that's the same piece you were watching, but that kind of set a tone for this team this year, and I don't think that they're as comfortable as they were likened to 2 years ago, and that team needs a little bit of not an overhaul, but I guess they need a couple more pieces to the puzzle and maybe reform their identity in a way. Um, I really don't think they have it this year. I'm not feeling it from Vancouver.
No, and I think that's the general consensus. You have to think, though, with the team that they've had and the success that they've had and falling just short a couple of years ago, it's something that you have to think if you're going to make a move, it needs to be made now. You can't run with this team for the next 3 or 4 years and then look back and be like, oh, at hindsight 2020, we should have made this move, this move, this move. You have two very good goaltenders, one of which has been on the trading block for about 2 years now. It's time to make that move. You have to go out, acquire some depth. I like the Roy signing that they made. They got him for a very good price. I don't know. There's something missing from that team.
Yeah,
And
and
I honestly cannot say what it is.
well, it's
I do
scoring.
not have that answer.
It's goal scoring for one. When Burroughs is leading your team with 13 goals, and you're up against the Sharks, where Logan Couture has 21 goals leading his team,
Yep.
that speaks volumes here. And it's not the names that you would expect from San Jose. Like a Patrick Marleau. I mean, he's up there. I mean, he's close. Pavelski, he's up there. He's close as well. But when you got Logan Couture leading the way. You've got some really good depth, and you got some great veteran leadership. You got Dan Boyle, who will hopefully not score on his own net this year, but across the board, I'm going to give all the credit here to San Jose, and I'm going to say this one gets decided in 6. What do you say, Shrems?
I'll take San Jose in 6 as well.
All right. Okay, so pretty sure of that one. So that way, Antiniemi will bask in glory again. It's been a while. All right, moving on to our next one. It's the final one in the West, and this one I think is the most enigmatic one, and it's so tough to call. These two teams, man, we saw them going deep. I mean, LA obviously the defending Stanley Cup champions, and St. Louis a favorite for the Stanley Cup this year. What do we do with these two teams? I mean, they are like literally neck and neck, but the Kings, they've blown out St. Louis. Let's see, the first time 4-1, then the next time 6-4 in an unsightly barn burner, and LA 4-2 back on March 28th. What do we think, Shrems?
My concern was coming into this whole thing. I'm on board with St. Louis and have been since the season's start. That was my pick for the Stanley Cup this year, and the one team that I didn't want them to see in the first round was Los Angeles, because Los Angeles, brought me that glory last year. It was a cute pick 2 summers ago, and it came to fruition. So I like what LA put out, and once again, LA is getting hot at the right time. And where this matchup is going to take a turn in LA's favor is goaltending. The goaltending for St. Louis just has not been there this year. It was there last year. Elliott and Halak split time. They did wonderful. The two were incredible last year. And then won the President's Trophy, got what they needed to, and got bounced early. So this year it's been quite clear that the St. Louis Blues have some issues to address between the pipes. Their forwards, I think you have one of the best grouping of young talent in the entire league in St. Louis, both forward and defense. But I don't know if Jarl Halak is the answer, and I don't know. Do you jump on an opportunity in the off season to pick up someone like Luongo or someone like Miller and fortify your goaltender? But I don't know. As much as it hurts me to say this, I think LA is going to take this one.
Well, I'm going to draw your attention to one name that stands out to me from St. Louis, and that is Chris Stewart. If we were to actually play out a full season here, I mean, man, he would be close to 40 goals. That's pretty impressive. Just standing out overall as a solid player, a solid right wing. I mean, this guy at 6'2", 231 pounds, he is pushing his way around and finding the back of the net. I like what I see out of him. And going down the rest of the roster, you've got the depth that a Stanley Cup contender needs. They are likened to LA from last year, but like you said, Yarrow Halak, I think St. Louis drank the Kool-Aid when they saw how hot he was, and decided we need this guy, and then dealt away Ben Bishop also, and the last couple of years for St. Louis has been kind of a goaltending enigma. The names that have run through the system, like Chris Mason as well. Um, you really got to think, can you be confident in this goaltender with this much firepower up front, with the capabilities of the firepower up front? I mean, you have a bunch of playmakers. When you look at the assists across the board, you're talking all the way down double digits to Vladimir Sobotka. And that's about what? About 12 deep on this team? That's pretty impressive.
I'm gonna run through the list here of players that are offensively skilled and can chip in, not just in the hit department or the fighting department. Andy McDonald, David Backes, TJ Oshie. Hopefully he's healthy and ready to go. David Perrin, Alex Steen, a surprise, having a nice season. Like you said, Chris Stewart, Patrick Berglund, Vladimir Tarasenko, who cooled off but has the ability to play well. Vladimir Sobotka, Jaden Schwartz is playing well. Chris Porter is playing well. On the back end, Bouwmeester, Petrangelo, maybe even Jackson can step up. I'm not going to say much about Jordan Leopold. He can speak for himself. He decides whether or not he shows up. Kevin Shattenkirk. I mean, these are big names that you want to hold on to for a long, long time. And it's all good when you have three lines that can put the puck in the net. But the problem is, Yarrow Halak is not playing up to where he should. If he was playing in let's say, give me a goaltender here. Holy smokes. Los Angeles. Help me.
Jonathan Bernier?
No, not Bernier.
What?
Jonathan Quick.
Oh,
sorry.
She's not quick enough, apparently.
If Yarrow Halak is playing to Quick's level at this point in time, this team would be unstoppable. But the faltering is going to come from the back end and the goaltending, and I don't know. They're gonna have to figure it out, because last year when Halak didn't have it, Elliott did, and when Elliott didn't have it, Halak did. And if they can find that somewhere here in the first couple rounds, and they can just blow right through, it's going to be a tough team to beat. But that one's on goaltending, and I don't know. I can't say St. Louis has what it takes right now.
Mm-hmm. Do you take a chance and put in Jake Allen? I mean,
Jake Allen's nice, but I don't think the last time we saw a no-name goaltender, well, not a couple of years, Antti Niemi. Nobody knew who Niemi was until he pulled home a Stanley Cup in Chicago. But I don't think Jake Allen is Antti Niemi.
Okay.
Not yet.
So, Shrems, who's got this series and in how many games?
I'm going to say 7, and it goes to Los Angeles in 7.
L.A. in 7. All right, well, I'm going to say L.A. in 6. One game fewer. So there's your West. And you and I, we're on the same page, except for that I'm calling that big upset. So I'm gonna stick with that Minnesota upset. Stranger things have happened. So, all right.
East.
Yeah. Let's try the East out, huh? This one, let's go backwards.
Really? You don't want to knock out the easy one?
No, let's not knock out it. Do you really think it's that easy? Okay.
The Islanders?
All right, fine. We'll start from the top and we'll work our way bottom.
Pittsburgh in 5. Next.
Crosby, will he be back in time?
I don't think he needs to
be. Your confidence, sir, is very admirable. Do you think a better team could have been in there instead of the Islanders?
I'm all on board with Winnipeg, to be honest with you. I'd like, and mainly because of the home ice advantage that Winnipeg has in their home barn. That place is just an incredible place to play hockey.
No.
And in the way that we saw Winnipeg finish the season, they had the hottest line that wasn't being talked about in Evander Kane, in Ryan Little,
yes.
and the third one's escaping me right now.
Blake Wheeler?
Blake Wheeler, there you have it. Those three were the hottest line in the NHL that nobody was talking about.
Yep.
The only problem is, and maybe the only line that they have, and I think scoring depth is going to be something that's going to be addressed in the offseason. Goaltending can hold up. Defense is surprisingly sound.
Yeah.
But I think offense is the name of the game that kept Winnipeg out. I can't say that the Islanders have the offense that are going to go and match up against Pittsburgh well.
You don't think Brad Boyce can do it?
You know, I like the story, but it seems very reminiscent of the one that got them in a couple years ago against Buffalo, where Wade Duplowitz won it on the last shot of the game there in the shootout that propelled them into the playoffs, and then Buffalo just manhandled them. And I think that series went 4-1. So I'm gonna go with much the same. I don't like Fleury as a playoff goalie. So after the first round, we'll talk a little bit of a different story. But perhaps the offense is good enough to get them by on this one.
So you're going to totally discredit Tavares and Molson and Grabner and Bailey and just say that they got nothing going for them. And you know what? I'm going to do the same thing too. I'm going to actually say that Pittsburgh sweeps.
Okay.
Right.
I like how scrappy they are. I like the young upstart feel of that team, but I don't think they have the veteran presence to pull off the big one. I would have liked to have seen a better veteran presence in there than Brad Boyce.
All right, fair enough.
Yep.
I mean, there's really not much more I can talk about this series. I'll be excited to see Jerome McGinley and Neal and Malkin, and it'll be fun to watch.
It will be fun to watch.
All right, Montreal and Ottawa. We have a Canadian matchup here. This one ought to be fun. Everybody was anticipating a Toronto-Montreal matchup, but instead we'll have to just make do with this as, well, Ottawa just could not leapfrog Toronto. And Montreal taking the Northeast, and Boston, fell just a point short. So let's see. This one, Montreal, you are totally on the Montreal bandwagon. You last year were not convinced that Ottawa was a playoff contender. Does the same ring true this year?
I'm not on board with Ottawa, and I don't know if I ever will be. I get they have good goaltending. I get that you have some younger players in there. I don't know. I just can't buy into this whole Ottawa Senators thing. You're not going to have Spezza, the pivot point of that team.
Yeah.
They got Carlson back, which is huge for him.
Yeah.
He came back the other night and he put 2 assists up on the board, which was deeply missed this season for sure. I'm glad to see him back, but Spezza is the pivot point of that team. You have a good young core out there, but I'm not a Mahalik believer. What he did a couple of years ago, that was nice, but I'm not on board with him. I like this young guy, Silverberg. He's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Turris is finally catching his stride. It took a couple of years and a couple of teams to find out where he needs to be in this league, and he's there. But I don't know. It's not there. Montreal has a Vezina caliber goaltender. They have 2, maybe 3 lines of scoring. They have a rock solid defense, and I don't know. They're going to be a team that people don't really expect to go very far, given that you have Pittsburgh and you have Boston in that division. But I think they're going to surprise. I think they're going to turn some heads.
So, with the addition of Conacher, you don't think? No.
Where you tell me this, Stearns? Where was Conacher before this season?
Where was he before the season? Well, he was with Canisius College.
Right.
Okay. That's it.
Wait. Let me further my argument here. Conacher, I'm not gonna knock his skills. He's had a good season. Where did he start this season? What 2 line mates did he have?
Well, being up there with
you put me with Marty St. Louis and Vinny LeCavier, I'm gonna do okay myself.
Yeah. Well, okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So you think it was kind of a red herring? You think it was just kind of a he was put with the right guys, and of course, Marty St. Louis and Vinny Lecavalier is going to make him look fantastic.
The
Well, he is
if
kind of
if
hurt too.
well, here's the thing:
Well, he's not hurt. I beg your pardon.
if Ben Bishop doesn't turn out to be what he is expected to be, and Conacher completely blows up and is a 70-point player for the next 5 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Ottawa wins this trade fair and square. I don't know if Ben Bishop is starting material right now. It seems like he has a lot of growing up to do. But Ottawa had that at their disposal. They had a goaltender that they don't really need. And they have an even better one in Robin Lehner waiting in the wings to take over the starting position at some point. I would have, if I were Ottawa, I would have done the same thing. I would have went out and got a player like Conacher, taking a chance on him. If he doesn't pan out, well, what were you going to do with Bishop?
Yeah.
He probably went back down to the minors anyway. So I need a couple more seasons on Conacher to completely buy into it. But Ottawa wins that trade. I'm glad he's there. He's got a lot of players that he can really grow with. In Florida, you have St. Louis, who's going to be out in a couple of years, Lecavalier, who's probably going to be out in a couple of years. You can't just be thrown into a number one winger slot. But if you have young talent around you that you can play with for a couple of years, I think it's going to work out well for him. Will it be the deal breaker this year? No, it won't. I'm not buying it. So I'm on board with Montreal.
How many games?
5.
Montreal in 5. Okay, I'm gonna. I don't know if I'm on the fence with this one for a few different reasons. Anderson's back, Carlson's back. I'm. Ottawa in 7. This one's gonna take a while.
Wow.
Yeah, it's gonna take a while. Let's just move on. I'm not going to provide much more than that. I mean, you've talked
fair.
enough analysis out of it, and I'm just going to go with it. Sometimes your gut speaks louder than your brain, and it's usually calling for beer. Next matchup: Washington, New York Rangers. I know where I'm going with this one, and I'm just going to come out right and say it. I don't care how hot the Capitals get. Eventually, they have to cool off. They got hot at the wrong time, I think. And I think this is going to be a monumental time for the New York Rangers to kind of get revenge. I mean, not revenge, but I mean, just try to. They're going to save face. And they're going to go ahead and take care of business this time.
My concern with the Capitals is that they're taking a very familiar path that the LA Kings took last year.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't really make too much noise, slid kind of into the playoffs on their back heels last year, and just completely destroyed everything in sight. Now, I don't think Washington is that team, but you're finally seeing Braden Holtby where he should be playing, where we saw Braden Holtby last year, leaving the NHL season as they got ejected out of the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people in this area, you heard it day in, day out on the sports newscast. Holtby is the future of this team. If he can play like he did last year in the playoffs, they're going to be a very dangerous team. And who knows, maybe he turns into that playoff goaltender again. I don't think I saw a goaltending performance like that in a losing effort since, I don't know, was it Jaguar who got the...
Yeah, back in 2003. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, Anaheim lost.
Yep.
But Jaguar got all the due in the world, which he should have. All the credit that was due to him came to him. And Holtby could be that goaltender. I like the offense. I like how Ovechkin has put his differences aside with whatever he was pissing and moaning about And I don't know, man. You got to watch this team. I like the Rangers. I don't know if it's too soon to tell whether or not that Gabbard trade was a good thing or a bad thing. They played well. They have the best goaltender in the league on their team. So we're going to see here shortly whether or not the trade actually made a difference. Obviously, before the trade, things were a little bit rocky. They've been playing quite well since then.
Yeah. Well, put this into perspective, will ya? Since Ovechkin has started with the Washington Capitals, his team has not been able to exit the second round. Okay, the last time was back in 1998 when they lost in the Stanley Cup final when they got swept by the Detroit Red Wings. That was the last time they've made it out of the second round. Let's go back, will we? Back to 2009. The Capitals beat the Rangers in 7 games. You were there, Mr. Schrems, in the stands, witnessing Sergei Fedorov making Capitals history. And let's move on a little bit further, shall we? The following year, the Caps lost in 7 games to Montreal, but they met a friendly, not-so-friendly foe. Well, actually, this time around, it wasn't that hard. It was 4-1. They defeated the Rangers in 2011, okay? So it looked like, oh, wow, this is, we're going on the up and up. And then they got swept in the next round 4-0 to the Tampa Bay Lightning. I remember that. I was out drinking some beers after a roller hockey game. It was fantastic. So 2012, the New York Rangers said second round, no, you're not getting out of it. Once again, Washington, they defeated them in 7 games. So kind of a back and forth history, and here we are again, okay? So 2009, 2011, 2012, and now 2013, the Washington Capitals meet the New York Rangers yet again. The upper hand right now obviously sits in the hands of the Washington Capitals. It's time for the New York Rangers to even this thing up 2-2 in the last 5 years. So I'm going to say the Rangers pull this one off in 6.
My biggest beef with Washington is the division that they play in.
Don't worry about that. Next year, it doesn't matter.
Right. Things are going to change a little bit next year. But I'm going to play devil's advocate with myself and say that the Capitals have not had nearly as difficult a schedule as the Rangers have this season.
Stop talking to yourself. Make the right call.
I don't know.
Anyone can beat the Florida Panthers, we found out this season, except for the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah, no, that's pretty evident. And I don't know. Let me come back to that at the very end. We only got one more of these things to do. We'll come back to that one.
You're going to hold off. All I got to say is think about the revolving door of the goaltending in Washington and who's always been there since the beginning with this rivalry that's come up in the playoffs between the New York Rangers and the Washington Capitals. One factor has always been there, and his name is Lundqvist. All right, let's move on. We'll come back to your decision on that in just a minute. We have our last matchup in the East. It's the Boston Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs. This one I could not have seen coming. We have an original 6 matchup here.
Sure do.
This should be a fun one, to say the least. It's been a very tight contest throughout the season between these two teams. The only the only +1 goal margin game back in early March. So 1-goal games pretty much throughout, but still the Boston Bruins have the edge 3-1-0 in this season, this shortened season. I really don't like what I see out of Boston lately.
No, Boston, about a month and a half ago, if you asked me, I'm pretty sure you did. I told you that Boston was going to win the Stanley Cup. Not so much anymore. Rask has come down to earth, has he not?
Yeah, and they're relying more on Khudobin, if anything.
My initial reaction is one, that Rask has taken himself out of the Vezina race, and I think that one's going to Bobrovsky, which would be awesome for Sergei. But 2, given what they went out and did at the deadline, I don't know. Is there something as bringing in too much veteran talent? Are they wasting roster spots on Wade Redden and Jaromir Jagr? Did they really need those 2 guys?
I don't think so. I mean, I thought they were doing fine at the at the pace that they had set themselves up with, I mean, uh, you had your clear defined leaders up at the top there. You didn't really have to toy with that chemistry by bringing in like well seasoned veterans like that of Yager and Redden. So I just I think that things are a little off kilter right now. I mean, yes, Marchand, Krejci, and Sagan are your top guys, no doubt about it. But whether or not you really needed Yager in a locker room, he hasn't done a whole heck of a lot, I think, in my opinion, to prove that he's anything worth that trade. I'm not convinced. I I'd like to know what the next team for Yager is. Is it going to be the Detroit Red Wings next year? It's come down to that point. I don't think Boston was the right fit for him. You've got enough depth up top that when you have to change the lines a little bit to accommodate for Jaromir Jagr, I mean, it does kind of throw things a little bit off. And things have been off in Boston for a few weeks now.
It's it was it was it was cute when they first did it initially. I like the idea of it, but now that I've seen it in action a little bit, I keep questioning whether or not it was necessary. Um, Especially when you bring in a player like that that's going to serve as it should be serving as a locker room role model, and not necessarily a top option on your right wing. And a player that I would have rather brought in, someone who's on their way out and knows their role, maybe someone like Steve Sullivan.
Oh, you keep on bringing up his name.
I like Steve Sullivan. He's been around. He knows what needs to be done. He's had playoff experience, and he's not going to be looking for 18 minutes a night.
True.
Sullivan's fine with 13, 14 minutes. It's that locker room presence that you want. Someone like Jason Arnott.
Yeah, where's he been?
Well, he passed his physical to play with a couple months ago.
St. Louis?
It might have been St. Louis. I know he failed the physical to start the season. Passed the physical not too long ago, but St. Louis didn't give him the option to come back. They were toying with the idea, but in that regard, Jason Arnott, if he comes back with the Bruins, certainly isn't going to be playing 17, 18 minutes a night. He's going to be playing 13 minutes, but it's that locker room that you want. The guy's got Stanley Cups left and right. He's been around for 20 years.
By the way, the correct answer was the New York Rangers, believe it or not.
Well, that's right. St. Louis was the one in which he failed.
Yep.
Well,
they just chose. Well, they didn't. He didn't fail it. He just chose not. The Blues chose not to re-sign him. So that was that. So, but how much do you think Peter Chiarelli is kicking his own ass about not getting Jerome McGinley and losing the battle with Ray Shero and having Pittsburgh win that sweepstakes? How much of a difference do you think it would have made to Boston if they would have landed Jerome McGinley?
Let me ask you this. How well has Jerome McGinley played in a saturated market in Pittsburgh?
Well, he did come out and play against Buffalo and scored the only goal for for Pittsburgh in that game. But aside from that, okay, you win.
It's nice to have him there. The name certainly propelled every projection from Pittsburgh being maybe the number one team in the power rankings to a definite number one team in the power rankings.
Well, as much as I haven't, real quick though, as much as I haven't really followed him, or actually the Pittsburgh Penguins for that matter this year, his numbers, they aren't as bad as they could be, but he's played so few games that it's not really clear what impact he has had on that team. So if you're asking if he has had an impact, it's hard to tell. So it's I think it's too soon because of the shortened season and when the trade deadline took place this year.
Sure. Now the question is, can he get hot at the right time?
Knowing him, we haven't had the chance to see that in a while because Calgary just can't crack the playoffs.
Yep. No, it's it's you can't say that Jerome Iginla has the playoff experience they were looking for because he doesn't. And um, you know, given the last time that the Flames were successful in the playoffs, 7 years ago,
Yeah,
is it coming up on 7 years ago?
it was a while ago.
Did they just bring in a name to bring in a name?
They may have. They may have. And I, I, I think I think we could just leave it at that. They did because they were proving to the league that they can.
Yep.
So the real question is here: Boston or Toronto? I mean, Toronto. We haven't really talked much about them at all. We've just talked
No,
about how
that's what makes
Boston has been floundering, but Toronto.
that's what makes Toronto such an appealing pick for the upset, a realistic upset.
In reality, it kind of isn't an upset. You know, I don't think it would be
Well,
such an upset if they did beat Boston.
I think people have a hard time shaking that Toronto stigma that's been with them for the past 8 years and saying, you know, well, let's put it this way: you have Toronto coming into this season with what expectation? Just take the ice and don't fall down.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, they're in competition and healthy competition with Boston in the first round of the playoffs. So, what do you do with this?
I'm torn. I'm gonna say that Phil Kessel and company will. I think they're gonna pull this off. I think Toronto, for the first time in over 10 years, is his. When was the last time? 2003?
I want to say it's been 8 or 9 years, man.
No, I think it's been since 2003, my friend.
Has it really?
I believe so.
Was that Buffalo series the last time they were in the
No,
playoffs?
no, Buffalo wasn't even in the playoffs in 2003. No, there's no they played a year after. I want to say, what is it, New Jersey that they lost to? Let me. Boy, we're really reaching back here. Are we really? Boy, has Toronto really been that bad?
They've had their struggles, to say the least. I
Well,
mean, coming into this season to where they are now, I think it's a huge accomplishment for that organization. And they needed it. There was
yeah,
all that talk a couple of years ago about putting a second team in Toronto,
yeah, the
and
millionaires they
maybe
were going to call themselves.
sure, and maybe now that they've found the success that they needed, they can finally put that whole idea to rest. Say, we have one team in Toronto, and in the next couple of years, we're going to be making a push for the playoffs year in and year out.
Well, I gave actually I don't even think it was the Millionaires. I can't remember the name of the team that was proposed, but it was 2003, 2004. They lost to the Flyers, so I was close. I was close. It was one of those teams up there in the Atlantic. So, um, yeah. It's been a long time. It's been 9 years, and 8 years if you count the lockout, 8.5 if you count the second lockout. I think I think I think Phil Kessel, Nazem Kadri. I mean, Kadri. I love what I see out of him. He's a great center. James Van Riemsdyk has really taken hold of his career, similar to like what we see out of Kyle Turris in Ottawa. Um, Dion Phaneuf, I do not know a tougher captain unless Steve Ott is named captain of Buffalo. Um, I'm gonna go Toronto on this one, and I'm gonna pick Toronto in seven.
I'm going to jump on board with that Toronto in 7 as well.
Ooh, Mr. Schrems. Now, we have to go back, and you're saying seven, by the way? Yeah? Did I hear
Yeah,
that correctly?
and we'll take the Rangers in 7 too.
Oh, man. All right, so
I don't know. I like Holtby. I don't think he's going to be a disappointment. He's a good playoff goaltender, and that's what they need.
okay, so we have three series that, actually, I beg your pardon, two series that you and I differ on. Oh, man, we're thinking two alike here. That could be a dangerous thing. So the only differences we have is I picked Ottawa in seven, you picked Montreal in five. I picked Minnesota in seven, you picked Chicago in six or seven.
Let's
So
let's make sure we keep this tally going
Oh,
forward.
I got it. I got it
Good,
written down here, and it'll be going on for years to come with our
good.
playoff predictions. So, yes, that'll do it for us today. This has been the playoff edition of the Cross Ice Feed. Shrems, any final thoughts before we head into the postseason?
How about next week we talk about what we've seen so far, and then we'll talk a little off-season free agency maybe, because there's a lot of rumors already flying about where people are headed to in the off-season. So might be fun to address and play with some numbers a little bit.
All right, well, we'll touch on that topic a little bit next week, and we were supposed to have a special guest in with us this evening, but we will bring him in next week, which will probably be more appropriate given the fact that playoffs will be well underway. So stay tuned for that. All right, everybody, this has been the Cross Ice Feed. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the playoff hockey, and as always, don't stop believing.